2012, I had an amazing opportunity to work in a pediatric orthopedic clinic. I actually got to work with patients from age 2 to age 92 from a wide variety of different conditions. Now, the strange thing was, I'd actually been in the industry designing products for patients for 10 years before this point. 10 years I was designing for people I had never actually talked to, interacted with, or put my hands on. That's not unusual. Most biomedical engineers will never get the chance to meet the patients their devices work with. So MedX and the Biodesign program here at Stanford is actually unusual in that they're making a lot of inroads in that area. They're giving engineers the opportunities to figure out what it's like to be a patient, what it's like to be a doctor, what it's like to be a caregiver. But there's a bit of a problem with this. This is really a one-way street. We are taking engineers and we are teaching it what it's like to be a patient, a doctor, a clinician. But what do the clinicians know about what it's like to be an engineer? There is a big gap between an idea that a doctor may have and a product that they can use on a patient. And understanding how to get from there to there is often a mystical process for anyone not in the engineering profession. So how do we make this a two-way street? Can you really believe, and being an engineer, I'd like to believe this, that there is something that we are so brilliant and so capable that we can figure out how to do all of your jobs and design tools to do your jobs better, but none of you can do a little bit of what I do? The fact is, innovation is not limited by profession. In the 1940s through the 1960s, the National Nursing Association had a journal, and there was an article called The Trading Post. And for 20 years, they shared their hacks, their innovations, their ideas about what they did to improve their patient care. In 2012, MIT's Little Devices Lab actually went and tried to find out, were the nurses still going? Were they still inventing? Were they still being creative? And they found that yes, they were. And not only did they discover they were being creative, they started developing platforms to continue to support and enable these nurse innovators. This is where Maker Nurse came from, and the Maker Health movement. Duquesne University has taken this a step further. In 2014, they started a dual degree nursing program and biomedical engineering program. In 5 years, you can have your RN, you can have clinical experience, an engineering degree, and you can be basically loaded to be able to go out and become an innovator with clinical specialties. But do you really need to spend 5 years? MIT's group, the Maker Nurse movement, found a lot of great innovations, but they're still hacks. These are amazing nurses who are taking popsicle sticks and surgical tape to make inventions. But can you give them something better than a popsicle stick? You know, can we give them something better than duct tape? This is some of the promise of 3D printing. 3D printing is a way of taking some of the expense and cost of producing parts, which for a new startup medical device is about half your startup cost, is just the parts. And instead of having to pay for molding tools, instead of having to hire machinists, you print your parts. But before you print a part, you need a model. And this is where the engineering expense comes in. The second biggest expense of a startup medical device company is the engineers. And so can you teach somebody how to make a model on a computer? And does it have to be an engineer, or can it be some other intelligent, creative person, like a nurse? So that is what I and my colleagues did. We hosted an afternoon workshop and open to CAD and medical device technologies, but you had to be a nurse to attend. And this was actually a formal research study we did with follow-up interviews. And this is what we found. If you are not a nurse, or you are not closely associated with nurses, you may have a slightly outdated view of what they do and the skills that they have had to pick up over the last 20 years. The fact is nurses are consummate technology users. Since the passing of the Medical Records Act and the federal government and their requirements to start of 2014, nurses can spend up to 70% of their day on a computer. And usually that is with highly not user-friendly software. They are also consummate learners. Constantly, day by day, they're given a skill and expected to use that in practice the next day. Compare that to an engineering major, who they can usually spend 4 to 6 years learning their craft before we're ever actually given a job that's, critical. And finally, if there is a big difference between the capabilities or the nature of the students between a nurse and an engineering student, it's the diversity. Engineering majors, when they go to college, they're in the same major, same program, and gender-wise, racially, are very consistent. Nurses, you have nurses who are 22, you have nurses who are 62. Some of them are on their second, third careers, like the speaker before me. She'd already been an engineer before she became a nurse. So, but the biggest difference of all I found was not in the students, it's in the context. You don't might know it, but engineering majors, we get free software. We get free certification. We have a major in a program that we do not pass if we do not learn this technology. That all goes away once you move outside the profession. The good news is that's actually changing. So in the last 5-10 years, we start seeing things like open source CAD software. If you have an idea, you can download the packages nowadays that 10 years ago would have cost you $5,000. We do have 3D printing. We have maker spaces. Even at MedX, we found out we have med school students putting maker spaces in hospitals. So the culture is changing. One of my favorite quotes is by Chris Anderson. It says, "We are all designers now, so we might as well get good at it." And for engineers, they might be insulted by that. We can take that to mean anyone can do our jobs. I don't think that's true. I do believe that there's a lot of passion and skill you have to learn to do my job. But I don't believe it is limited to those people who are already in the engineering profession. And in that case, I'd like to say, if you have the desire to be a designer and you have the skill and ability, then go ahead and get good at it.